In lesson number 16, you have a continuation of the first declension, but in this lesson, you are introduced to some variations that may cause just a little bit of difficulty as you work on the first declension. So take your books and turn with me to number 53. And we have already had our quiz with reference to the vocabulary. Now notice verse 54. Nouns of the first declension with nominatives in alpha not after epsilon iota rho are declined as follows. Now in the preceding lesson you were introduced to nouns that end in alpha that are preceded either by epsilon or by iota or by rho. That's on page 52. Now if I were you, in order to keep these two straight, I would just simply dog-ear your book or put it in your notes. The difference between page 52 and page 54, because there is a variation with reference to the declension when you have a noun that ends in alpha that's preceded by epsilon iota rho with the noun that ends in alpha that is not preceded by epsilon iota rho. Now the lesson for today deals with that variation, and so he uses, by way of illustration, the noun glossa. Now you see the word tongue ends with alpha, right? But the preceding character before alpha is a sigma. Therefore, it is not preceded by the epsilon iota rho and is declined in a little different fashion. Now you watch it. And I'm simply going to read it so that you can follow along in your books to note the difference. Now the nominative, masculine singular, is the regular vocabulary form, and you'll observe that it is accented on the P note, the glossa. Now in the genitive and ablative, notice the alpha is changed to ace, eta sigma, and because the ultima is long with the eta, the accent over the omega has to be changed to the acute. Are you following? All right. Now, the same thing occurs for the locative, instrumental, and dative. The alpha is changed to eta. And again, you have the change in the accent. Now observe always that in the locative, instrumental, and dative singular, you always have the iota subscript. Now I don't know whether you can tell that or not in your book, because sometimes the print runs together. Do you see that the eta has the iota subscript? Alright, fine. But now when you come to the accusative, you have the alpha coming back as far as the declension is concerned, and since alpha is considered short in the accusative, then you have the circumflex accent over the P note omega. And the vocative is the same as the nominative. Now, when you come to the plural, notice as far as the plural is concerned, it's quite regular, isn't it? Ice, own, ice, us, I. And of course your accent follows accordingly. I suppose, again, that the thing that you should note with emphasis is the paragraph entitled Observation, paragraph 106. And he just gives you in sort of a summary form the things to note. When epsilon iota rho does not precede the alpha of the nominative singular, the alpha is changed to eta in. Now underline those particular cases: genitive, ablative, locative, instrumental, and dative singular. If you would underline those by way of remembering what happens with, as far as the alpha is concerned, the alpha is changed to the eta. Now number 2, when the alpha is short in the nominative singular, it is also short in the accusative singular. Now, we pointed that out. You'll observe that in the nominative singular, the vocabulary word has the circumflex over the omega because the alpha is short. Now, when that's the case in the nominative, it's the case also in the accusative. Now then, he gives you some words that you haven't been introduced to yet. But here's the place you get introduced. Contract nouns of the first and second declension as gay, which is earth. And you'll notice it's a feminine noun because you have the feminine article a. And mana, and it's also feminine, are declined like phone and cardia respectively, except that they have the circumflex accent on the ultimate throughout. Now, what's he saying? First of all, you haven't been introduced to a contract noun. But here is the example of a contract noun. You're going to soon learn something about contract verbs, but this is a contract noun, and you're not aware of the derivations and so forth, so he just gives you the nominative form. Well, gay is going to be translated like phone, whereas mana is going to be translated, declined like cardia. Now, mana certainly is not, the alpha is not preceded by absolute or rho, is it? But you have that variation. So there's an exception to the rule. So if you just want to draw a line from gay to phone and mana to cardia, then you'll have the type of declension that you should follow when you work them out on your paper. Now he explains to you in paragraph 108, nouns of the first declension with nomatives. Nomatives in ace or us are masculine in gender. But now listen, he's saying something to you here. We're dealing with first declension nouns, aren't we? And he is saying that there are some nouns that end in eta sigma and some nouns in the nominative that end in alpha sigma. They are first declension nouns. And so, in paragraph 109, he gives you the illustration of the first declension masculine noun. Now observe that the noun prophetes is followed by ha, and ha is the article of the masculine, as a masculine noun, and thus you are to decline prophetes as a masculine noun in the first declension as follows. Now this one, oh, what a time I had with this. Because I wanted to get some similarities, eh? Well, you have an awful hard time finding similarity here. Now observe. Nominative singular. Prophetes. Prophetu. Prophete. And prophetain and propheta. Now then, before each one of these cases, you will have, listen, the masculine article. And you know, I think you ought to put it on there. There's ha, there's tu, there is to, and there is the ta. Of course, it'd be like that when it's followed. Okay? Even though this is a first declension noun, you will have the masculine article. Remember that? The masculine article is ha, tu, to, ta. Alright? Any problem? Any question? Now you know what the masculine article would be as far as the plural is concerned. So you can fill that in by way of your own notes. Now, he gives you another paragraph to observe. Observe the genitive and ablative singular oo is the same as in the second declension. Now the vocative singular is alpha. The masculine nouns of the first declension in taste have a in the vocative singular. The plurals of all nouns of the alpha declension are alike. I own, ice, us, I. So be thankful for small favors when it comes to the first declension. If you get the plural down with the alpha declension, then you are straight all the way through. All right, now then, in paragraph 111, he gives you the nominative form of the masculine noun youth. See? Neos. Now then, this will not be declined like prophetes. Instead, it is going to be declined like cardios. Why? Because preceding the alpha sigma, the nominative has iota. See that? Prophetes does not have epsilon iota rho preceding the ace. And so, here in this lesson, you have three illustrations as to first declension nouns. The first illustration, and I repeat this for emphasis, is a noun in the first declension that ends in alpha that's not preceded by epsilon iota rho. The second illustration is a masculine noun of the first declension that the ending is not preceded, it is just a masculine noun that is not preceded by epsilon iota rho. Whereas the third illustration, paragraph 111, is a masculine noun of the first declension that is preceded by one of the other, epsilon iota rho, and in this case it is the iota. Alright? So you have three illustrations of the first declension in this lesson. Now I would suggest you really get it down, because we are just about through with the nouns of the first declension. In fact, I believe we are. We're going to be looking at some adjectives of the first declension in the next lesson. So I want you to do your exercises of paragraph 112, please. Paragraph 112. Now then, I felt as though for this morning we should pick up something that we have been letting go. And that is, I believe we have learned enough Greek that we are familiar now with the alphabet. Isn't that right? You can probably say the alphabet just right through. But there's one thing we haven't learned when it comes to the matter of the alphabet. What is it?
Capitals.
That's right, the capitals. Therefore, for tomorrow, along with this declension and the exercises, you are going to be responsible for knowing the capital letters of the alphabet. Now what I'm doing at this juncture is I'm changing just a little. Instead of giving you the vocabulary of the following lesson, I am going to, from here on out, make you responsible for everything that's in a lesson. So our little quiz tomorrow, not tomorrow, but the next particular class will be a quiz over the capital letters, also any of the declension of this lesson. Okay? Now that will, I believe, help us because as we go from lesson to lesson now, it's not only just the vocabulary, but everything in that lesson that will be responsible for our little 10-point quiz. And this will get us away from the idea, well, our quiz is just vocabulary. Therefore, you will spend more time on vocabulary and let the rest of the lesson slide, won't you? Well, we all being rather human beings, taking the easiest way down the hill, we do things like that. So we'll try and help you and correct that matter. Do you have any particular questions as you turn to page 19? Any particular questions as how to write these things? Perhaps I ought to put them on the board, and this will give you an idea how to write them as far as your capital letters are concerned. Now, you must remember that each one of these capital letters, what we call an uppercase letter. What do we mean by uppercase?
It takes the full line.
Right. Suppose that is the line on your paper, like that. These capital letters will take up the whole line, such as alpha, like that. That's how you would write the alphas. Nothing. It isn't very difficult at all. But instead of putting this line on the board each time, let me just write the letter down, and you realize that it is an uppercase letter. All right, the alpha is written just like the capital A, the beta like the capital B, as far as our English vocabulary, alphabet is concerned. Now the gamma is written a little different, just like that. It's just an open box on two sides. Now the delta is a diamond like this, see? That's the delta as far as our alphabet is concerned. There isn't anything difficult with the epsilon. The zeta looks like Z for us who are here in Canada, or a Z for those who would say it as far as the south of the border is concerned. Now the eta is like a capital H. Now the theta. The theta takes up the whole line with a line through the middle. That's all. The theta. The iota is the capital I. Now the kappa, a capital K. Now when it comes to the lambda, it's a lot like the delta. The only thing, it doesn't have a bottom to it. It doesn't have a line across the bottom. One's a diamond, the other is just the angle there. The mu, a capital N. The nu, a capital N. Now the xc. Well, we ought to erase it and put the xc on, although it just pretty well follows that which is printed for us. But it is just a line, a little line, and like that. Now if you want to put some little hooks on it, that's fine, just to indicate that that's the xc. The archon, capital O. Now the P, you're well familiar with the P. Now it's just the same as the small, but it is the uppercase letter. The rho, you're going to call it a P, isn't that right? It looks like a P. Well, it's a capital P as far as the English is concerned, but it is a rho as far as the Greek is concerned. Again, a capital letter. Now the sigma, written just like that. Sigma. Sigma. Tau, a capital T. The epsilon. The epsilon, just like that. Like a Y, but pretty well. Some like to put it like that. Well, that's fine if you want to just put a hook on it, just to help you note the distinction between this and a Y. The phi, you'll recall that the phi, the little phi, why, we would drop the straight line underneath the line. Well, you don't do that as far as the capital is concerned. It's just like that, pretty well this way. Chi, a capital X. Now C. This is uppercase letter, uppercase letter. And the omega. This is probably the one that has so much variation. That's the omega. All right, now that is how you will write your capital letters as far as the alphabet is concerned. Now you'll be responsible for that for tomorrow also. So there's the lesson. You have the exercises. Be sure and note the 3 different types of illustrations as far as your first declension, and have your capital letters down. All right, fellas, we'll conclude with that. This class session deals with lesson number 17, as found on page 56, and it happens to be a lesson that combines the adjectives of the first and second declension. So you're going to have what is called a combination. Now you can understand why you have learned, first of all, the second declension, and secondly, the second declension, because when you come to the adjective, you have a word that's going to be involved in both a second declension noun and a first declension noun, and later on you're going to find it involved with third declension also. So on page 56, this is what I want you to do for the next class session. I want you to learn the vocabulary. Then I want you to know the declension, and I also want you to know the significance of how an adjective is used, as well as doing the exercises on page 58, paragraph number 122. Now then, again, please repeat for me the vocabulary as we have it before us. Agathos,
Agathos,
agapetos,
Agapetos,
eschatos,
Eschatos,
kakos,
Kakos,
kalos,
Kalos,
pistos,
Pestos,
protos.
Protos.
All right, now then, you will be studying in your last year here a course that is called eschatology. Eschatology. Now what does that deal with?
End-time prophecy.
You're talking about prophecy. That's what most people understand eschatology to be. But it in effect is the doctrine of last things. And so here it is taken from the Greek word eschatos, last. Eschatology, eschatos. Now, we gave you an assignment last time to make sure that you learned the capital letters. Trust that you have that well in hand, because you'll probably be seeing those a little bit later. But now follow along in your book and let's notice what we have by way of the adjective of the first and second declension. Paragraph number 114. Most adjectives of the vowel declension have 3 endings: os, a or a, or on, corresponding to the masculine, to the neuter, and to the feminine genders of nouns. Adjectives are declined in gender, number, and case. What else is declined in gender, number, and case? Adjectives are declined, and you've learned what else when it comes to the matter of the declining of a particular part of speech. What are they?
Substantives.
Substantives called nouns. Nouns. Now then, we're dealing with an adjective that is used at this juncture. We'll simply state it, used with a noun. Now, tell me what an adjective is. What is an adjective?
It describes the noun.
All right, it is a word or that part of speech that describes a noun. Now, if you talk about hat, the hat. That is just simply a noun, isn't it? The hat. Now if you say the small hat, okay, small is an adjective describing a certain characteristic about a hat. The hat is small, in other words. That is what you call a predicate adjective, but we'll learn more of that just a little bit later. Now the adjective agathos is declined as follows. Now he is going to give you the illustration of how the first adjective agathos in our vocabulary, how it is declined. Now then, notice if you will, there are really two columns. There's the column that gives you the singular, and there's a column that gives you the plural. Now, if I were you, I'd draw a line right straight down through the middle of those 6 columns, because that will divide for you the singular aspect of the declension from the plural part of the declension. Now then, please observe that this particular word, agathos, is declined in the masculine and in the neuter of the second declension. Whereas the feminine is declined like the first declension. Now do you see that? I'm just going to read the masculine second declension of agathos. Agathos, agathu, agatho, agathon, agathe. Plural, agathoi, agathon, agathois, agathus, agathoi. Follow? See that? That is the second declension. And you've learned it, haven't you? So there really isn't any problem. There's os, u, o, on, e. Oi, on, ois, us, oi. Now then, the neuter. You've already learned it, haven't you? The endings, on, u, o, on, on, ois, a. Alright, again, precisely the same as your second declension neuter noun. Now then, the feminine. The feminine. The feminine is the declension of the first declension. Better write it on top there. First declension. A, ace, a, ain, a. I, on, ice, os, I. Following? See that? It isn't difficult if you'll just follow along each one of these columns by the explanation given. Not verse, but paragraph 116. Observe. In form, the masculine is declined exactly like a masculine noun of the second declension. The neuter like a neuter noun of the second declension. And the feminine like a feminine noun in eta, or in the first declension. All right. Now then, he said, want you to observe, under the little a here, the accent. The accent of the feminine genitive and ablative plural does not follow the accent of the feminine noun of the alpha declension as given in paragraph 94, but the regular accent of the masculine. Thus, the genitive and ablative plural feminine form of eschatos is eschaton. Now, in the first declension of the noun, see, doesn't make any difference where the accent falls on the nominative noun. When it comes to the plural of the genitive and adverb, takes it clear to the other. Not so with the adjective. Not so with the adjective. Now, that's just to keep you on your toes. Always remember that always does not necessarily mean always, especially when it comes to Greek. All right? Paragraph 117. And this is something that you must remember. I put a circle around paragraph 117 and put footprints on it and stomp on it and batten the hatch down and everything else. adjectives agree. Do you hear that? Adjectives agree with the nouns which they modify in gender, number, case. Okay? So when you come along and you find an adjective, and you can recognize the gender, the number, and case of that adjective, you know that the noun that modifies has to be the same. Okay? Now then he gives you an illustration. Tu, pistu, dulu. Okay, the adjective is pistu. Now you will see that tu there is genitive, isn't it? You'll see that dulu is genitive. Therefore, pistu has to be genitive. And whatever is your gender, that's exactly what pistu has to be. And whatever the number, that's what pistu has to be. Now then, the same thing for te, prote hemira. Precisely the same gender, precisely the same number, precisely the same case, and so forth. All right, paragraph 18, 118. Adjectives are used to refer to nouns in two ways. Either, number one, as an attributive, or number two, as a predicate. Now then, you are going to be confronted with those two words throughout the rest of your study of Greek when it comes to an adjective. So you must know what the term attributive means, and you must know what the term predicate means. Now he has told you that these two terms relate to how the adjective is used. Now he is going to illustrate for you. You know, this is a great book because it not only tells you a fact, but it illustrates it and then gives you an exercise. There are 3 teaching principles that he gives you practically in every single lesson. He'll tell you the fact of it, he'll give you the illustration of it, and give you some help as to observe, and then he'll give you a practice of it. Now you couldn't ask for a much better approach teaching-wise than that. Now, how many times has a parent in the teaching a child how to tie a shoe with a shoestring, although there's lots of shoestrings going off the market now, they just slap over the top and it sticks. But now watch Daddy. Yeah, he'll tie it. That little one will just watch. Now then, let Daddy tie your shoestring. And the little one will watch again. And he'll explain all the time. Isn't that right? He'll explain. Now, you do it. Well, they might get half of it done and it'll come apart. But practice it. Practice because they've been instructed, they've been shown, and then they have to practice. And for long, by the way they get it, with the way they get the job done. Now that's the way you learn Greek too. All right. Now then, he said here are some phrases in number 1 and 2 under paragraph 118, which will illustrate for you what I've just said. In the phrase ha pistos doulos, the faithful servant, pistos, faithful, is an attributive adjective. It qualifies the noun, doulos, servant, to describe without any assertion about it. So here is an adjective that is in what we call the attributive position, describing doulos, or the servant. Now, ha, pistos, doulos. Pistos occurs between the article and the noun. Therefore, it is in a position called the attributive position and describes the noun doulos. Now then, he said, number 2, I want to show you what we mean by virtue of a predicate adjective. In the phrase, ha doulos pistos, the servant is faithful, the predicate adjective, pistos, faithful, makes an assertion about the noun doulos, servant. It is important to understand this distinction between the attributive and predicate adjective in Greek. The distinction lies in just this, that the predicate presents an additional statement, while the attributive is an inherent description. Okay, now let's back up and just restate the thing a number of times. If I want to describe the hat, I will use an attributive adjective. The
Small hat.
the small hat, that's right. The small hat, or the big hat, or the red hat, or the black hat. If I want to make it a predicate adjective, I'm going to make an additional statement about it. The hat is big. The hat is small. The hat is red. Now that's predicate. Now, in making it a predicate, you insert the little word is, right? Therefore, you're making an added statement, whereas the attributive is simply descriptive. The red hat, the big hat, the small hat, attributive. The hat is big. That's an additional statement about the hat. Now then, he said, here are examples of the attributive and the predicate adjective. First of all, he said there are certain positions that you need to remember. Look at it now. Number 1, the attributive position of the adjective. Ha pistos doulos, or ha doulos ha pistos. And it's translated, both of those particular constructions are translated the faithful servant. Note that the adjective comes immediately after the article. There's the key. Where does the adjective occur in relationship to the article? And for an adjective to come immediately after the article, it is an attributive adjective. All right, now then, on top of page 58, there is another order of the attributive position. Notice this. Doulos ha pistos. It is not frequent in the New Testament. But listen, even though doulos does not have the article, you will note that the adjective pistos follows the article. That's still an attributive adjective, the faithful servant. Okay? Question at this point? Always when the adjective follows the article, as far as this point, until we get to an exception a little bit, always until exception, the attributive adjective follows the article. Now then, he said, here is the predicate adjective, the position, the construction, in other words. Number 2, the predicate position of the adjective, ha doulos pistos, pistos ha doulos. The servant is faithful. Note that the adjective pistos does not come immediately after the article, but either precedes the article or follows the noun. So if I'm going to be able to determine by virtue of position or construction whether the adjective is attributive or predicate, I look for the adjective in relationship to the article. That's what I do. If it follows the article, and when we say follows the article, I mean immediately follows the article, then I know it's attributive. If it does not follow the article, then I know it's predicate. Because here in ha doulos pistos, what is the position of pistos in relationship to the article? What is it? Ha doulos pistos. What's the relationship?
Before.
Huh?
It's before.
No, you mean the article is before what?
The adjective is before the article?
No, well it is in the last part there, pistos ha doulos, but the first, ha doulos pistos.
It follows the noun.
It follows the noun. In other words, the article does not precede it, does it? And in the second illustration, pistos ha doulos, the article does not precede it there. Therefore, I know by virtue of construction or position, in light of the explanation at this point, I have a predicate adjective. So the key is the location of the article in relationship to the adjective. Okay? Now then, here's a little bit of an exception I think he's going to give us here. Paragraph 120. When the article is not present. Now then, when you don't have an article, how am I going to determine whether I've got a predicate adjective or an attributive adjective? Okay? I have the solution. The context must decide whether an adjective is attributive or predicate. Now then he says, we'll give you an illustration. The phrase pistos doulos or doulos pistos may be either attributive, a faithful servant, or a predicate, a servant is faithful. Now then, again, what do we mean by context? What's context?
Sentence structure for meaning?
Well, a context is what is said around a particular portion of the sentence. Isn't that right? In other words, if I have doulos pistos or pistos doulos with no article, the interpretation or the translation is totally dependent upon the preceding or following words. What is meant, how it's used within a sentence, and sometimes how it's used within an overall structure of that particular part of the scriptures. So now, fellas, you have 3 illustrations concerning the adjective. You have an attributive adjective, you have a predicate adjective, and then you have those 2 adjectives without the article. Okay? Now he tells you there is a particular word. There is a particular word in the New Testament that never has the attributive position, but always has the predicate position. In the New Testament, holos, whole, never has the attributive position. And yet, it is translated as an attributive. Okay? It doesn't have an attributive position. For instance, let me illustrate that for you in your exercise. Notice number 5 in paragraph number 122. Notice what you have there. An holoto cosmo. All right, now that particular prepositional phrase is in the whole world. See, not in the world is whole. But you see, it's in, as far as the position is concerned, it's in the predicate position, isn't it? Because halo being locative there and has the locative form. Why, it does not follow the article but precedes the article. Therefore, it is in the predicate position but is translated as an attributive adjective, the whole world. Now, I have found this particular lesson to just be a lot of fun. And do you know why? Because now I'm beginning to build upon just some nouns and some verbs that I have learned. Because I can do lots of things now. I've learned prepositions, I've learned nouns, I've learned verbs, and now I've got another helpful word to make a sentence more meaningful for me in the Greek. I've got an adjective. And all of a sudden, adjectives are wonderful because adjectives just really unfold for you a wealth of truth. All right. Well, we'll get on to some more things here just a little bit later. But for our next class session, I want you to have lesson number 17 well in hand. All right. All right. Fine. Our lesson for today is found on page 59, lesson number 18, and it is a continuation of the declension with reference to the adjective of the first and second declension. Actually, there are other things besides just the declension. In fact, he deals with some of the function of the adjective at this juncture. Now, I want you to pronounce for me once again the adjectives as we pronounce them. Ionios.
Ionios.
Dikaios.
Dikaios.
Now we've had the noun righteousness, right? Dikaiosune. You remember that one? All right, now this is the adjective dikaios. All right? Heteros.
Heteros.
Now let me just point this out to you. We've had the word allos, right? Another. Allos. Another. All right, now here's heteros, meaning another of a different kind. The word for, say, I have another pencil would be allos. If we would say that we have one pencil and one pen, we could say, I have another writing tool when we refer to the pen, but it would not be a pencil, you see, it would be a different one entirely. And so, heteros, you've heard of heterodoxy, right? Heterodoxy, some kind of a doctrine that is different. Now this is what you have in Galatians chapter 1, where the Apostle Paul says, if anyone preach unto you a heteros gospel, it is not another allos, but it is heteros. So he does not link any kind of a message other than his message saved by faith with the gospel. He says every other gospel is heteros, different. Now he is very emphatic, and once you get through the book of Galatians, you're pretty well convinced that he holds lock, stock, and barrel just to what the Bible has to say. All right, one's own idios,
Idios.
monos,
Monos.
mikros,
Mikros.
poneros.
Poneros.
Oh, now there are not very many to learn, but have them down well in order, please, for our next lesson. Now, he is going to tell you that as far as the declension of idios and mikros is concerned, that's found in paragraph B13. Where are you going to find that? Where it says capital B, 13. Where would that be?
Appendix.
All right, clear back in the back of your book. That's right. Turn back there in the back of your book and look for B. And what does it say? B13, which is on page what?
221.
That's right, 221. Now you see he gives you the declension of idios, idio, idio, idion, idio, masculine, feminine, and neuter, and the plural is on the other side. Now you'll have to learn those, eh? Learn them. They follow along pretty much the same as what we have learned before, with a few little variations. So get them well in hand. Now then he says, observe, when epsilon, iota, rho precedes the final vowel of the stem, the feminine has alpha in the nominative singular. Now in the nominative and genitive plural feminine, the accent follows the masculine. Now there's the rule for these two words in light of the declension, both the second and first declension, and the variation that we noticed yesterday when it comes to the matter of the genitive and nominative and genitive plural of the feminine. All right, now number 125. Some adjectives, especially compounds, have only two endings, the masculine, feminine, having the same form. All right, how in the world are you going to tell then? How are you going to tell when an adjective is masculine or when an adjective is feminine if you have the same form?
By the context of the noun.
The context, but there's one other
What about the article?
The article. The article. Now you see, the article is not going to change. You're going to have either the masculine article or feminine article. But the form of the adjective will be the same. Understand that? There won't be any difference as far as some adjectives. Okay, how am I going to tell when I've got such an adjective? There's where your lexicon comes in. You're going to have to get out your lexicon, and they'll show you what gender it is. All right, now, number 126. Prepositional phrases or adverbs are often used like adjectives in the attributive position. What is the attributive position? Attributive position is when something follows the article, and the adjective follows the article. All right, now he's going to say prepositional phrases are often in the attributive position. Now look at his illustration. Hoi en to oiko anthropoi. What is hoi?
The article.
Article. Where's the noun that the article goes with?
Anthropoi.
Anthropoi. Now then, notice the prepositional phrase, en to oiko. Where does it occur?
In between the article and the...
The noun. So that prepositional phrase is in the attributive position. But how would you translate it? Notice how he tells you to translate it. The men in the house. It's not the in the house men. Understand? However, when you do have the prepositional phrase in the attributive position, it is to be translated with that noun. Now, you're going to come up against prepositional phrases which are not in the attributive position. And you'll have to translate them in light of the particular context at hand. But when you do have the prepositional phrase in the attributive position like you do here, then that prepositional phrase must be translated with that noun and not with some other noun. Okay? The noun may be absent. Well, now then he's getting things a little more difficult for us. Ta en tois uranois. Now then you will observe the article ta. Ta. What kind of an article is ta?
So, feminine?
Is it feminine or is it
Neuter? Neuter.
neuter? That's it. Neuter what? Neuter?
Plural?
Neuter plural. Absolutely so. Neuter plural. All right, now then, do you see any neuter plural noun there? No. But you do see a prepositional phrase, don't you? En tois uranois. See that? Now that's a prepositional phrase that's in the attributive position. There isn't any noun that's indicated with the article. So, now then, observe how he translates. The things in the heavens. The things. Why does he say things?
Because there's no adjective given and the neuter refers to a thing or...
You mean there isn't any noun given?
Yeah.
And the article is what? Neuter. Therefore,
Okay.
you add the neuter noun and observe the number. It's not the thing in the heavens, but the things. You see how important the article is? The article ta is giving you now the significance of a plural noun. And the prepositional phrase is in the attributive position. So the things in the heavens. Okay? Now, paragraph 127. The adjective in any gender without a noun is often used as a practical noun. Usually with the article, but not always. All right, now notice what he has stated. If there is an adjective, and sometimes there isn't a noun that it goes with, it becomes pretty much the noun. For instance, ha kaloi, the good, see, the good men or people. All right. Now, ta agatha, the good thing. You add the noun that goes with it. Te trite. Notice the case. Here's locative. On the third day. Okay. Now, paragraph 128. As a complement, the infinitive, mostly in the active voice, is used with adjectives, nouns, and verbs that imply power or ability, fitness, capacity, and their opposites. Dunatas ko luein, able to hinder. Or exousia ekbalein, power to cast out. Dunamai akuin, I am able to hear. Well, that's not too difficult for you. I want you to do the exercises there in paragraph 129. Now this exercise, he's going to give you the function now. But remember, you not only have function, fellas, but you also have the declension for idios and mikros, okay? Now, there's how the adjective is going to work and function. So give yourself some time to just study through that. There isn't anyone that can teach you apart from study how these things work and how these things function. So get a hold of it. Now, let's, for the sake of any problem that you might have had with reference to the exercises of today, exercise 122, the Greek to the English. Did you have any problem? Any problem there with reference to any of this? Okay.
Dr. Goulais, I had a question. They gave an example of declension of an adjective on page 56, paragraph 115.
Yes.
And it was when the accent fell on the ultima.
Right.
Now, does it follow the same rules as, say, for the first declension and the second declension when the accents fall on the penult and
Exactly right.
antepenult?
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. The same accent rule. He gave you the illustration simply of a noun that has the accent on the ultima, right? But as far as eschatos, for instance, the same rules apply, okay? That you have learned with reference to the second declension and the first declension. Wherever that particular accent may fall, okay, go ahead and use it, as far as the adjective is concerned. But just remember that he states that when you have the adjective in the feminine plural, when it comes to the matter of the ablative and genitive, there is the exception to the accent rule. All right, there any questions whatsoever with reference to the exercises? You able to do them all right? Okay. All right, fine, fellas. Then get your lesson number 18. You're coming along real good. Just give yourself plenty of time to batten some of these things down in your thinking. Okay, fine. Our lesson for today on page 60, lesson number 19, is, if you can put it this way, one of the more important lessons that you will have as far as Greek is concerned, because you're dealing with a verb that is used in so many different constructions and is exceptionally important. Now that's lesson number 19, the personal pronouns and Amy. The personal pronouns and Amy. And in this particular lesson, you're also going to be introduced to what is called enclitics. Enclitics. But the first thing that I want you to do is to take the first 7 paragraphs, paragraph 130 through 137. Now we're just going to deal with that by way of explanation this morning, and then we will deal with the rest of the chapter in the next lesson and give you the exercises to do, because I really want you to get a hold of this these personal pronouns and Amy. All right, now let's repeat the vocabulary first before we read and try to give some words of explanation. All right, Allah,
Allah,
Gar,
Gar,
Ge,
Ge,
De,
De,
Ego,
Ego,
Amy,
Amy,
Su.
Su.
Now notice at the bottom of that particular list you have 3 words that are translated by the one English word not. You have ook and ook. All right, now let's pronounce them. Oo,
Ooh.
ook,
Ook.
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 Now there's very, very little difference between the kappa and the ki by way of the phonetic value. The oo, the ook, and the ook. Now then, on top of page 61, he gives you some explanation for some of these words. Words that cannot come first in a sentence are called postpositives. Now, underline that word, postpositive, will you? And not only underline it, but learn it, because this postpositive deal comes up so often in your translation in the Greek New Testament. Now then, you must remember what a postpositive is. It is a word that does not come first in the sentence. In other words, it's a word that usually cannot come first in a sentence. And it will usually be found as the second word. Now, I'm not too sure that I can say dogmatically that's always the case, but it will not be first, but it'll be very close to the first part of the sentence, usually the second word. Now then, he gives you three, which are positives, gar, ge, and de. Now, those three particular words will not be found as falling first in a Greek sentence. And let's see if I can, if he gives you an illustration in the exercise. Yes. Would you turn to page 65 just to note that he gives you an illustration. Note, if you will, verse 2, number 2, and it's not verse 2, but it's number 2 as far as the exercise is concerned. Hemes gar, genos gamen ton kurion. Now observe that gar, see where gar falls as far as the sentence is concerned? It comes after hemes, but it will be translated first. See? So that really is for we. For we. Okay? Now then, let me continue reading. B. U is written before consonants, ook before vowels, and ook before rough breathing. Now then, that's the reason for the three Greek words that are translated and mean not as far as the English is concerned. The American upsilon is written before the consonants. Words which begin with a consonant. Eh? Now then, if you have not with a word that begins with a vowel, it'll be written American upsilon kappa. Now then, if you have the word not that is written before a word with a rough breathing, then it's American upsilon ki. Okay? So don't get confused with the types of negatives that you will find. Paragraph 131. Generally speaking, the pronoun, because we're dealing with pronouns in this particular sentence, the pronoun is a word that stands in place of a noun. So do you understand what a pronoun is? A pronoun is that word that's going to take the place of a noun in a sentence. You do not speak this way. The man went hunting. The man got in his car. The man took his rifle. The man walked in the bush. No, you'd probably start out this way. The man went hunting. He got in the car. He took the gun with him and he walked in the bush. You see, the little word he is a pronoun. Now it breaks the repetition but refers back to the noun, the man. Okay? The idea that is set forth by a pronoun is the relation of a subject or object to the speaker. The reason for the use of the pronoun then is to avoid the repetition of the noun, which I just gave you by way of illustration. So it is a part of speech, a pronoun, a part of speech, which is going to take the place of a noun and breaks the monotony of the use of a noun in a sentence. Now then, is I want to give you the declension of what is called the first personal pronoun, ego, I. All right? You'll notice the singular on the left-hand column. You'll notice the plural in the right-hand column. Now then observe. You've got ego, then you have emu, and then mu. Two different forms. Two different forms of the word for the first personal pronoun in the genitive case. The same for the ablative, the same for the locative, instrumental, and dative, and the same for the accusative. Two different forms. Now don't get confused that as far as the genitive of the first person, the genitive isn't emu mu. No. Those are two different forms. Two different forms for the genitive of the first person pronoun. Now then, you'll notice on the right-hand column, the plural of I is we, right? Hemes, hemon, hemen, hemos. And you will have precisely the same English meaning for the various cases, although he only gives you the nominative and the genitive, and then he puts the etc. to let you know that the English translation is precisely the same as far as the ablative, locative, instrumental, dative, and accusative are concerned. Now then, in paragraph number 133, he gives you the declension of the second personal pronoun, you. Now, he is using, as far as your text is concerned, the Old English expression for you. He's using thou for the singular, ye for the plural. Now, today we speak, as far as the second person is concerned, we speak as you. And we use that particular word for both the singular and the plural, don't we? So don't get too confused with reference to the expression of the second person pronoun by you or thou or thee. Now then, in the left-hand column you have the singular, and in the right-hand column the plural. And observe, if you will, that when it comes to the second personal pronoun, there are also two different forms. Two different forms excuse me, for the second person singular, beginning with the genitive and continuing through the accusative. There are two different forms. Now in the plural, instead of it being humes, hemes, it's humes. Now here's a little key, because oh my, how I used to get these two plurals confused. I'd be translating along and I'd be wanting to say you for we and so forth. But the you plural is upsilon. And now that's the easiest way in the world that I know of how to keep from being confused. The upsilon, or that looks like a little u, that will be the second person plural. Is the upsilon. Now the first person plural is eta. Hemes, you see. Of course they have the rough breathing. Now, generally speaking, what is the difference between the two different forms? Now, just by observation here. Just by observation, what is the difference between the two different forms in the first person singular genitive through the accusative?
No accent.
There's no accent on one form, and there's one form that does not have the epsilon, right? Okay. So that's the only difference. One form, it has the epsilon. The other form, it doesn't have the epsilon or the accent. Now then, when it comes to second person singular, one form has the accent, the other form doesn't have the accent. So those are rather simple to observe. Now then, let's turn the page and look at the particular explanation by way of observation. In the singular of the first and second personal pronouns, there are, except in the nominative, two forms for each case. An accented form and an unaccented form, which in the first person is also shorter than the accented form. These forms are called, get it down, these forms are called enclitics. Enclitics. Now we're going to learn something about these enclitics, beginning with paragraph 138. But he just is introducing to you by way of meaning this morning. Now paragraph 135. Commonly, the accented or emphatic forms are used with emphasis or contrast when it is desired. When emphasis or contrast is desired. So if there's going to be an emphasis or if there's going to be a contrast within a given context, he says we're going to probably use the accented form. Now then, he makes an explanation here, which some will say, well, it's a contradictory. Well, it's not contradictory. It's just the fact that the rule doesn't always hold. Yet it is not certain that all emphasis is absent when the unaccented or enclitic forms are used. Now, number 2, with prepositions. The emphatic or unaccented forms are used generally, except with pros, which ordinarily has prosme. So, with reference to the prepositions, he is simply stating that the emphatic or accented forms they usually occur. Now, number 3, in general, the personal pronouns were not used in the nominative case unless emphasis or contrast was desired. Now he gives you an illustration. Tan angalan et blepan ego. Now that translation is, I was looking at the angel. You see ego? You see the word eblepan? Now eblepan is first person singular imperfect indicative active of the word blepo, right? Okay, now then, ego is your first person singular pronoun, right? Now he's simply stating, generally speaking, when the personal pronoun is used in the nominative, it is to lay stress as far as the subject is concerned. Now then, he tries to do that by way of the explanation that he gives in parentheses. It was I who was looking at the angel. See that? Now then, that would be simply the explanation. That is not a translation. That is just an endeavor to show you that he was trying to emphasize the fact I was the one who was looking at it, no one else. Emphatically, I saw this. Haven't you been out fishing? And I'll never forget it. I took Lila, a little city girl, fishing. And I went upstream where it was good fishing. I just took off. And I came back with quite a nice string of fish. And lo and behold, when I got back to camp, there she strutted. She strutted around camp. And she had the biggest old long trout you ever saw in your life. What did you catch? Look what I caught. So she was emphasizing what? I caught the biggest fish.
Nominative.
Nominative. All right, you've got estin. Look across the page to estin, and you find it's the third person singular, don't you? However, it's not spelt that way, is it? Why do you have the noun following esti? Well, that's what we call a movable nu. Yeah, remember, movable nu. The nu likes to move around. The nu likes to attach itself to the end of a word when that word ends in a vowel and has another word that follows. Okay? And so estin is exactly the same as esti. Does that help?
Easy.
All right, fine. Good enough. Now then, what case is anthropos? What case is anthropos?
Nominative.
Nominative. Now then, you remember, we have learned that a verb takes an object. All right? You have subject, verb, and object, right? Subject, verb, and object. I wonder if I hadn't ought to put this on the board if I can. All right. Ha, ma, thetes. S10.
Just one new one.
Anthropos. There's your subject. There's your verb. Now what's this?
Noun.
It's a noun. Case.
Nominative.
Nominative case. Now then, being in the nominative case, what have we learned that nominatives do?
They're usually the subject.
Usually the subject of the verb. Now then, the disciple, what's the subject of estin?
The man.
No. Huh?
He. Relating back to.
Okay,
the
now
disciple.
then, look here on page 62. Third person singular. Either he, or it's either she, or it's either it, right? So, that tells me right there that here is the third person singular pronoun. Right? Third person singular. That's not a pronoun, but it can be, but let me erase that. Third person singular, anyway. The subject is hamathetes. The disciple is. The disciple is. Now then, estin, third person singular, is used as what we call a copulative, and it connects this word with that word. But this word occurs in the nominative case when used with Amy. Okay? When used with Amy, that becomes nominative. Will you remember that? You have to remember that. Or you're going to be trying to make that the subject of that. Well, you've already got a subject, haven't you? Yeah. The disciple. The disciple is a man. Predicate nominative. Predicate nominative. Predicate nominative. Predicate nominative. It is in the predicate position, right? That's what we've learned as far as an adjective is concerned. This happens to be a predicate noun. You can have predicate, you can have predicate adjectives too. But this happens to be a predicate noun. All right? Now that's something that you must remember. Now let me go on. Note that the subject may be known from the predicate whenever the subject has the article and the predicate does not. Now he gives you another example. Agape estin ha theos. Now then, how do I know what is the subject there? In light of just what he stated in that sentence.
You know the subject has the article before.
Yeah, you know God is the subject because it has the article. See? So, instead of translating love is the God, you translate it, God is love. See that? Therefore, I know ha theos is the subject. Just like I know this is the subject here. That doesn't have an article. This has the article. I know this is the subject. Now then, it doesn't make any difference which way it is written. This could come before S10. This could come after S10. Therefore, it's still the subject because it has the article. Has the article. Understand that? Here, agape is the predicate because it does not have the article, while theos does have the article. Now, listen, there's quite a lot to remember just in light of that particular explanation, and our class is way over time at the present time. So we will conclude the lesson there. Ask you to be sure and get your conjugation and declensions down in this particular lesson, all right? All right, today we have a continuation of lesson number 19, with reference to personal pronoun and Amy. But this particular class session, we want to give emphasis from paragraph 138 to the end of the lesson, in which we deal with little words that are called enclitics. Enclitics. Now then, before we really do get started too far, I want to call your attention, as we previously mentioned before we had the video on, in the vocabulary of paragraph 130. The little word de will have a number of meanings which do not particularly appear in the vocabulary. For instance, one meaning that will occur quite frequently is now. Now. It's used sort of inferentially, that is, conclusion of previous statements. And the little word ge, being an enclitic, frequently it is not translated. It just simply is for emphasis, but you will not give the meaning in deed or at least. However, in the beginning, while we're just learning it, we'll use the vocabulary form. So with that explanation, let's go on to the little words enclitics. Now you will remember that these enclitics are words that have a lot of fun with reference to the matter of the accent. Paragraph 130. Enclitics are words attaching themselves so closely to the preceding word as to be pronounced with it. Usually they have no accent of their own. So we are going to deal with a word that is sort of not attached to its preceding word, but is to be used with the preceding word. And thus, it affects the stress as far as syllabalization is concerned. Now then, he gives you a number of rules. You'll find 5 of them, in fact. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on page 64. How the enclitics accent works. All right. The word before an enclitic is treated as follows. Now he's talking about the preceding word to the enclitic. If the preceding word has an acute accent on the antepenult. Now you know what the antepenult is. It is the third syllable from what we would call the end of the word or the ultima. It receives an additional accent on its ultima from any enclitic, whether of one syllable, monosyllabic, or 2 syllables, diasyllabic. Now then, he gives you the illustration. Here we go. Ha didaskalos mu. Now take a look at didaskalos. Didaskalos. the enclitic that is used with didaskalos, mu, does not have the accent, does it? Now we've learned that particular form, but it's still an enclitic. That form is in your declension on page 61. Thus, the word didaskalos, that normally would be accented on the antepenult, not only has the accent there, but also on the ultima. So there you have a word with two syllables. Two accents. Now he gives you another illustration. Ha didaskalos estin agathos. The teacher is good. Now estin, or the third person singular of the word Amy, is an enclitic. Therefore, didaskalos receives an acute accent on the ultima, and estin loses its accent on the ultima. See that? Now, immediately someone is going to say, in the conjugation, the third person singular is esti, and here it's estin. Why the nu? Well, that's what we call a movable nu. Movable nu. And it'll move around on you. Movable nu. And so it will occur when a word follows estin. Now then, here is the second rule. If the preceding word has an acute accent on the penult, now we come back one, doesn't it? Its accent is not affected in any way. Then a monosyllabic enclitic loses its accent, but a disyllabic enclitic retains its accent. Okay, here's the illustration. My word, or ha logos mu. You see, mu only has one syllable. Well, the Greek word logos isn't changed. Then let's go on to the next one here. Hey, cardia su. Again, the very same. You will notice that there isn't any change on cardia, is there? None whatsoever. Now then, when it comes to an enclitic that has two syllables, halagos estin ionios, the word is eternal. So you see, estin keeps its accent, although it's turned to grave, and the reason it's turned to grave is because a word follows. Any problem here? See what he's driving at? The difference between a one-syllable word and a two-syllable enclitic. When its preceding word is accented on the penult. Now number 3. If the preceding word naturally has an acute accent on the ultima, it keeps its own accent, and any enclitic loses its accent. All right, here we go again. All right. Ha adelphos su. All right, adelphos keeps its acute accent, and the one-syllable enclitic isn't changed. Now notice what happens to a two-syllable enclitic. Ha adelphoi ac pistoi. The brothers are faithful. All right? The enclitic ac loses his accent. See that? But there isn't any change as far as adelphoi is concerned. Now number 4. If the preceding word has a circumflex accent on the penult. Now we're going to change from the acute to the circumflex. It receives an additional accent, acute, on the ultima from any enclitic. Now see how this works as far as the one-syllable and two-syllable enclitic is concerned? Doulos, a circumflex over the penult, and it receives an acute accent on the ultima. Now then, with a two-syllable enclitic, doulos maintains It's circumflex, and the ultima receives an acute accent. But st loses its accent. All right? Now number 5. If the preceding word has a circumflex accent on the ultima, its accent is not affected in any way, and any enclitic loses its accent. All right? Ha huios tu adel fumu. Now you see the one syllable enclitic doesn't have an accent, but adel fu has a circumflex on the ultimate. There isn't any change. Now with 2 syllable enclitic, hoiduloi tu theu. Now then, tu theu, circumflex on the ultima, and the enclitic lost its accent. All right, he gives you 2 things to observe with reference to the rule of the enclitic. Observe, a monosyllabic enclitic regularly loses its accent. A syllabic enclitic retains its accent only under condition named in 2 above. Very simple observations to hold to. Okay? Now then, number 140. And you can say, well, he gave us some rules. Now, he's got to come along and tells us, well, sometimes it keeps its accent. So that's what it says. And enclitic sometimes retains its accent. When there's an emphasis on the enclitic, or when the enclitic begins a sentence. Okay? One for emphasis, and one when it begins. Number 2. St is written st at the beginning of a sentence when it means exist or is possible, and when an amini follows alla, a, guy, and so forth. Well, that's just something that you will learn by way of use, and it isn't hard to observe that. Now then, a proclitic, or an enclitic, followed by an enclitic, receives an acute accent. Ha gedulas mu esti. All right. What do we have here? What is ge? Hey?
Indeed.
Yeah. Now then, didn't we see in the vocabulary that ge has an accent? Oh wait, nothing. What is a proclitic? Well, let's go back to 72 and 75. 72 and 75 and see just exactly what he says a proclitic is. 72. Paragraph 72. Does he say anything here what a proclitic is? Words which do not have an accent are called proclitics. All right? So a proclitic is a word that doesn't have an accent. An enclitic is a word that can lose its accent. All right? Now then, let's go back to our illustration on page 65. Now, ha get dulos mu esti. Now look at this illustration, what he said. A proclitic or an enclitic followed by an enclitic receives an acute accent. All right, now then, ge has an accent, so it's an enclitic. But ha, the article for doulos, is a proclitic and doesn't have an accent, so it took ge's accent. See that? That's the reason ha has the acute accent. Are you following? Do you see that? All of you see that? Now then, doulos is a word that was accented on the penult, followed by an enclitic, so it gets an acute on the ultima, but the enclitic mu is followed by another enclitic esti. So that enclitic mu receives the accent from the enclitic este. So you've got a good illustration of a proclitic, an enclitic, an accented noun on the P note that gets another accent from a enclitic that follows it, and then an enclitic that follows the enclitic. How that enclitic gets an accent, and the following enclitic loses it. So these are just explanations that you'll want to hang a hold of. All right? Now then, for tomorrow, or our next lesson, I want you to do all of your exercises, and we will probably take a little time to go through those particular exercises, because we have come to lesson number 20. And as soon as we finish lesson number 20, you know what happens with lesson number 20 then, don't you? So, that will be all we will do as far as our lesson today. But I wanted to take 2 days for this, because this lesson is very important. The word Amy, the first person, second person pronoun, and some of these enclitics just occur, I don't know how many times in the New Testament. But you are just going to be confronted with it over and over and over again, and you must get this lesson down like you've never gotten any other lesson down before. It doesn't mean that you can slack on any other lesson, but it does mean that you certainly must know this lesson. All right, fellows, have your exercises well in hand then for our next lesson. On page 65, lesson 20, we're introduced to the third personal pronoun as well as the imperfect tense of Amy. Now, again, let me emphasize how very, very important it is to have these pronouns down and also Amy, because here are 2 particular aspects of the Greek language that simply occur over and over again throughout the entire New Testament. So now I want you to follow along in your lesson as we read it, and also please pronounce the vocabulary after me. And note the 3 genders that these first 2 pronouns appear in. Allos and autos. See, it's not only the masculine, but then you have the little eta, and you also have the armican. So this means that this particular word, along with autos, is going to occur in all 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Okay? All right, let's pronounce them. Allos.
Allos.
Autos.
Autos.
A.
Halos.
Halos. Hati.
Hati.
Scotia.
Scotia.
Now, before we go any further, please note the footnote, if you will. Now, this footnote is calling you back to your exercises which have been assigned to you, particularly exercise number 3. And see the little number 1, estin. Now, we've mentioned this on a previous occasion, but here is the footnote that gives you a full explanation. All right, certain words, that is words ending in C, sigma iota, Also the third and the third personal singular of past tenses in epsilon, and esti may add the noon. This is called movable nu. Movable nu in the older Greek was written when it would be followed by a word beginning with a vowel. But later it was written before consonants and vowels. Now, we've had a little bit of a problem with this matter of the movable nu. In some declensions or some cases of the noun, you're going to find this noon occurring, and you're going to want to make it a movable nu in your declension. Well, no, that's not going to be the case. It's going to be found in your verbs. And as he stated here, the older verbs or the older Greek had the movable nu before a word that followed beginning with a vowel. Now that isn't a rule that holds true throughout the New Testament. The only way that I can tell you that might be of help is just simply get suspicious about the noon. Just the noon. Just watch it when it comes to verbs. And you can easily tell whether it's going to be a movable nu or is part of the word. All right, now then, you'll observe, as we mentioned to you, that this lesson does involve the third personal pronoun. Now, he gives you the declension of that particular third person pronoun, but please notice before we do that, the meaning for autos means self, very, same, he, she, or it, eh? Now then, the three bottom ones, he's the masculine, she is the feminine, it is the neuter. All right, there are the three meanings for the third personal pronoun. Now then, it also has a number of other meanings, autos, very, or same. And we'll be noticing something about that in this particular lesson. I just say this to you, autos is used in a number of ways. It's used as a pronoun, it's used as a demonstrative, it is used as an intensive, it's used as a reflexive, and so get your autos. You're going to really enjoy that. Now the declension of autos on page 66, paragraph 144. Again, in the left-hand column, please observe that you have the second declension. In the middle column, the feminine, you have the rules for, primarily, the first declension. The neuter, the second declension. And he gives you this explanation. Observe that autos is declined like agathos. And you ought to go back now and look up paragraph number 115 and observe the manner in which autos is declined because it follows agathos, except that autos has no vocative and the neuter and accusative singular have no noon. So this will just refresh your memory in this matter of the adjective, but this is declined like the adjective. Now then, paragraph 145. He's going to introduce you now to the variations of this particular word autos, which is the third personal pronoun. Now then, he's saying in paragraph 145, he's going to give you the meaning and the uses. You better underline those two words. The meaning of autos and the uses of autos. First of all, he says, it is properly a demonstrative pronoun. A demonstrative pronoun. Do you know what a demonstrative pronoun is? A demonstrative pronoun is the word For that, these, those, and so forth. Now then, he says, this word, which is really a demonstrative, we're going to show you how it is used and what it means in a twofold manner with the illustration in number 3. Number 1, as an intensive pronoun. Underline intensive. Intensive pronoun, autos, means self, himself, herself, or itself, and is in the predicate position. Tell me, what is the predicate position?
Follows the article.
Hey?
Like the article and the noun, and then you have your pronoun or adverb or adjective.
Yeah, that's right. In other words, the predicate position is the position that does not follow the article. Does not follow the article. Now then, notice, he gives you the way this occurs. Autos ha anthropos, illustrating exactly the same meaning for ha anthropos autos. Autos does not follow the article, does it? In one case, it precedes the article. In the other case, autos simply follows the noun. However, the article does not precede autos in either one of the illustrations. Therefore, the meaning for autos ha anthropos or ha anthropos autos is the man himself. That is what you call the intensive pronoun, and the translation or the use of the intensive pronoun. Himself, herself, itself. See? Always emphasizing self, 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 self. Now, that isn't too hard to think through, is it? What do we do so many times when we want to brag? Well, we talk about ourselves, isn't that right? What I've done. This means this to me, and etc. Well, it is the use where the third person pronoun is simply intensifying itself. All right, now then, as an identical pronoun, it means same and is in the attributive position. Now, what do we mean by the attributive position? All right, we mean the position of the pronoun that follows, this third person pronoun autos, that follows the article. Now, observe the illustration that he gives. Ha autos anthropos. Ha autos anthropos, meaning the same man. The same man. Okay? So, please remember the difference between the identical and the intensive pronoun and how they will be found by way of construction in the sentence. When the article precedes autos, the meaning is always, 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 it means the same. So here you have two rather concrete rules that you can hang on to, and you'll just simply need to put them in practice and study them, whereby you'll understand. Okay, now number 3. When used alone. Now notice this. When used alone in the genitive, ablative, locative, instrumental, dative, and accusative cases, these are, incidentally, the oblique cases. An oblique case is every case except the nominative and the vocative. This word is the simple personal pronoun of the third person. Now, when it's used alone. In other words, when it is not used with a noun, so forth, why, it will simply be your third personal pronoun. Here's the explanation and the illustration. Blepo auton. Blepo means I see, isn't that right? Auton, what case is auton in? What case is auton?
The accusative.
Accusative case. And it is functioning then as what?
The direct object.
The object of the verb I see. I see him. Okay? Now then, Pempamen autus. Pempamen, first person plural, present, indicative, active, of pempo. How did I translate that? I? It should be we. It should be we. We send autus. We send them. Now you see, autus is the accusative plural of autos. So it is used not with a noun, but it is used in relationship to a verb, and here it's by itself. And so we have it in the case of its function. We send him. Now then, the next phrase, ento oiko autou. All right, in the house autou of him. That's what we'd call it, wouldn't it? Now, what case is autou? What case is autou? Can you tell me?
Genitive.
Genitive. Now then, since it is in the genitive case, you remember the genitive is translated of. So we would translate it, just by virtue of what we've learned thus far, in the house of him. In the house of him. All right, now then, if we say in the house of him, we're talking about his house, isn't that right? In his house. Showing, if you will, that the genitive is referring to the house as being his. So it is the showing possession here. In his house is the proper way to translate it then. Any problem there? Okay, now then. In the last illustration, he is stating another use as it is used with the preposition here. Lombane ton arton, apa autes. He takes the bread from her. See, autes is in not the genitive case, but the ablative case. And why the ablative case? You remember? Or is this part of our lesson? No, you've had that before. That's a preposition which only takes the ablative. Remember that? Apa, apa, from. And anytime you are using a preposition that's showing a separation, and this he or she or whoever the a refers to here in the verb, at least the third person singular, and they've translated, he takes the bread from her, getting the bread from her. Therefore, you have the genitive autes. Now he gives the explanation, or another explanation. With autos in the nominative, sometimes it is not clear whether we have simply an emphatic he and so forth, or an intensive self. Now, there's only one way sometimes you are going to be able to tell, and that is what the context is telling us, or how it is constructed by way of use or meaning in the sentence. Now then, paragraph 146. The substantive to which a pronoun refers is called its antecedent. So you are being introduced now to a new word that is going to set you in pretty good stead throughout the rest of your Greek life. And that is some things that do some modifying and things that come before are called antecedent. And so again, the noun to which a pronoun refers is called its antecedent. Now let's see if we can discover the antecedent. Well, he tells us, but before we look at the answer, let's see if we can just do this. We know the teacher and we speak to him. We know the teacher and we speak to him. What is auton referring to?
Didaskalon.
Didaskalon. In other words, auto, I said auton, but it's not auton, it's auto. Auto is referring to the noun didaskalon. See? And didaskalon is called the antecedent of auto. That's what he states here. Ha didaskalon is the antecedent of auto. So if you would at this juncture begin to become conscious of words that refer back or words that refer to different words in the sentence, train yourself to say, okay, now that's the antecedent. That's the antecedent. Eh? That's what it's called when the pronoun is referring to a noun in the sentence. Okay, you've got that referred to as an antecedent. Now then, here is the explanation for that in number 2 that you must remember. A pronoun. A pronoun agrees with its antecedent in gender and number. All right, now then, he says as far as didaskalon, didaskalon is masculine in gender, singular in number. Therefore, auto has to be masculine in gender and singular in number. You see that? Now that's the same functioning that we have learned by way of the adjectives. Isn't that right? The adjective must agree with the noun that it modifies in gender, number, and case. Now when it comes to the pronoun, it must agree with its antecedent in gender and number. Now, I have written in my book just a little question mark right over the word gender. Now then, the reason I write this little question mark over the word gender is because you are going to find in your Greek New Testament the Greek word pneuma. Pneuma, which means what? Spirit. Spirit. Pneuma is spirit. And it is neuter in gender. Now then, often you find the masculine pronoun referring to the neuter noun, which does nothing more than gives the personality of God the Holy Spirit, which we've already learned, haven't we, in our Holy Spirit class. So I wouldn't state that the pronoun always agrees with its antecedent in gender and number. I wouldn't do that. But I would certainly state that this is the normal as far as the Greek New Testament is concerned, and you would simply have an inspired reason why there is a disagreement. And that will, of course, refer you to some specific reasons, such as I have just mentioned, that you have in the Greek, how that a masculine will refer back to the neuter. Now then, 147. For the term allos, Allos is declined, except the accent, like autos. Note the omercan in the nominative and accusative neuter singular. Allos is used alone with the article, but in the New Testament, never in the sense of the rest of. So there's just a little word of caution. Now then, the Greek word holos. Holos. And I like, when I can, to find some definite things, and he is mentioning here something definite. Holos always has the predicate position in the New Testament, but is translated, now notice how it's translated. The illustration is holos, hakosmos. It's translated how?
Predicate?
It's translated, not predicate, but attributive.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you see, its position is predicate. Its translation is attributive. See, you don't say the world is whole unless there's a specific context demanding that. What you do, you're talking about the whole world. The whole world. Therefore, even though this particular word takes the predicate position, it has, if you please, the attributive meaning. All right, paragraph number 140. Paragraph 148. And now, the imperfect. The imperfect indicative of Amy. And I want to tell you, get it down. Absolutely get it down. Because now you've had the present indicative of Amy. Now then, you have the imperfect indicative of Amy. All right? The first person singular, I was, is either ain or amain. Second person is ace or ace tha. The third person singular is ain. Plural is amen or amatha. Second person plural, at. Third person plural, they were. Now he just simply gives you the explanation for the variations that you're going to find in the following explanation. Now I want to get through paragraph 148 because it is most important for you. The conditional sentences. Conditional sentence. There are 4 separate forms for Greek conditions. 4 separate forms. In other words, there are 4 conditional sentences. 4 conditional sentences in the Greek. Now, the first conditional sentence means this: the condition determined as fulfilled. All right, let me read. Here, any tense of the indicative is used, generally after a. In the protasis, the if clause. The apodosis, conclusion, generally has the indicative any tense, but any mode may be used according to what is wanted. All right, in a brief word, it simply says this: a conditional sentence has what you call an apodosis. A protasis and an apodosis. You can always remember it because the pra is that which comes before. That's first, pra. Protasis is your if clause. The apodosis is the concluding clause, or what the relationship is to the condition which is set forth. And in this instance, he is simply stating that a condition is set forth, and that condition in the apodosis fulfills the condition that is stated in the protasis. Understand? All right, now he gives you the illustration. If he is saving men, what's the conclusion? He is glorifying God. If he is saving men, that's your protasis. Your apodosis is he is glorifying God. So the condition is determined or stated in the protasis, if he is saving men. Now then, The apodosis shows you that the prodosis is fulfilled. He is glorifying God. You understand that? I might take just a little time to think that through, but that is precisely the case. Now then, in the second illustration, he is using the imperfect of aiming. If he was saving men, he was glorifying God. Precisely the same. Now then, let me read what you've got here, fellas. The indicative states the condition as a fact. You must remember that the indicative mode is stating something as a fact. It may or may not be true fact. Right? It is just simply stating something as a fact. It may not be true. For instance, I might state this. Satan is a good fellow. Well, I make that statement as a fact, isn't that right? But it sure isn't true. It sure isn't true. That's all he's trying to say here. The condition has nothing to do with whether it's true or not, but only with the statement. Now the negative of the prodosis is generally ou in the first class conditional sentence. You have that? Now that's a tall order by virtue of a lesson, and an extremely important lesson. And so we'll have the exercises for tomorrow or the next class of page 150, and here I believe we'll draw together a number of the loose ends which we've had in the previous lessons, and we will try to give some explanation in this regard. All right, fine, thank you.